Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we're going to be talking about wintertime chatterbait fishing. I'm going to run through all the different types of chatterbaits I like to throw during this time of year, the different trailers I like to throw, and also the different color combinations. And this is going to cater more towards, the southern part of the country. Obviously, way up north, you guys have pretty hard water right now. You've got your lakes have frozen over. So this is kind of from the Tennessee region south. You could go a little bit north from us and still apply some of the different colors that I'm choosing. But generally, this is kind of a southern thing that we're going to be talking about. And the period in time that we're really discussing also is different depending on where you're at. For me, here in Tennessee, it's anywhere from late November all the way through February is what I consider wintertime. However, there is kind of two different periods during the wintertime that I think are really important to kind of point out. And we've talked about this transition that happens during the wintertime in several videos recently, but we're going to touch up on it again right here. Essentially, that has to do with what type of food the fish are eating and what type of forage species they're focusing on at any given time. Because earlier in wintertime, so late November through December, right now it's Christmas time, and then going into the first half of January, I would say, and obviously these are just very general statements as far as the timeline goes, but during that period in time, the fish really do focus on shad more. I would say a bigger population of bass are focused on shad than any other type of forage species. And that's because shad is super prevalent this time of year. What happens is those shad make that migration, that fall migration into the backs of the creeks, and they group up, they get in these giant schools, and you'll have millions of shad in any given creek. And then as the water starts to cool down, they start moving out to deeper water, and a lot of those shad will just kind of gang up in one deeper area of a creek. They may not make it all the way to the main lake. They actually like those deeper, more stable areas within a creek, but have deeper water access. So the fish, the bass, they focus on shad because they're just so plentiful. They're so grouped up, and the cold fronts that are hammering those shad really do affect the shad more than most species. They are very delicate when it comes to drastic temperature changes. The shad can get stunned, and you could also have a die-off. So it's a very easy meal for those bass in general. And so those fish will feed on those shad until they start breaking up, and the shad start kind of moving away a little bit. And so that period in time really starts happening at the end of December and January, when you start to have that breakup of the shad. There's not nearly as many as there was in the bulk of December. And when that starts to happen, I feel like bass start focusing more on crawfish. Now, this is not, again, these are general statements. And whenever you're making a general statement in fishing, there's plenty of situations that go against that statement. So, but I would have to say that once January, mid-January and February come around, crawfish patterns tend to work better, and I tend to catch bigger fish with them during that time period. So anyways, so with that said, on the type of forage that we're targeting, or the type of forage that the bass are targeting, and we're targeting the bass, early season, we definitely want to run shad pattern type baits. So this right here is a white and chartreuse. This is the new Chatterbait Elite Evo from Z-Man. This is a really good option this time of year, the colder months. I really like a white and chartreuse. There's just something about that cold water that tends to turn shad a little bit more opaque than other times of the year. It's kind of weird. You know, I'm not basing this off of like actual science that I've read. It's just observations, but it seems like colder the water, the more white and, you know, and more opaque those colorations get. And also another thing that probably factors into it is the fact that this is the rainy season. This is the wettest part of the year. You get a lot of fronts coming through, lots of rain, and that means that the water is going to dirty up a bit. And that's why I really like white and chartreuse. And the new Chatterbait Elite Evo has something special. They've got a nice gold blade on there, which works really good in dirtier water. And the trailers that I use with, you know, when I'm trying to imitate shad, during the wintertime, really, I like a very subtle type of trailer, something that doesn't have a lot of action. Like during the summertime, I'll throw the Z-Man diesel minnows quite a bit. The paddle tail style, you know, tail creates a lot of action and, you know, just looks realistic for, you know, how active the fish are that time of year. But this time of year, I like something that's just a little bit more subtle. And so they came out with the new Chatter Spike, Z-Man did. It's got a segmented tail design there, and it creates a real nice, fluid, subtle action to it that really only engages with the action of the blade, but it looks very realistic. It has more of a tight action to it. Same thing with the Razor Shads. This was kind of the original jointed trailer that Z-Man came out with. Really good trailer to this day. I would say it has a little bit more action than the Chatter Spike, but both of these are really good. And another thing that this style of trailer does that doesn't have a lot of appendages, really no appendages at all, and it doesn't create a lot of drag, is the fact that I like a yo-yo technique a lot during the coldest months. And when you have something that's a little bit more streamlined and doesn't have a tail on it, it actually allows this bait to kind of glide on the fall. So I think it has a more realistic and attractive fall than, say, you know, something like this with the turbo craws on it. This will make the bait want to parachute kind of straight down, while this has a little bit of glide. I'm not saying it like really glides. Like, it's not going to be like a hover rig style glide that goes like this, but it's going to have a slight angle to it. So this is really what I like to throw almost exclusively. Sometimes I'll throw the Chatterbait Mini Max if the shad are really, really small. But I really like this new Chatterbait Elite Evo. And, you know, I use a 1/2 ounce, 3/8 ounce version, whichever one really fits the depth that I'm fishing. But white and chartreuse is like my go-to this time of year. The only time I really change is if the water is like super, super clear. And in that situation, I may not even be throwing a chatterbait, to be honest with you. I might be throwing something different. But usually the lakes around here, a little bit dirtier. You've had a lot of runoff, and a lot of times they've lowered the lake down. So like the runoff that is coming into the lake is running through that kind of like clay mud on the banks anyway. So it gets really dirty this time of year. So white and chartreuse works really good with the Chatter Spike or the Razor Shads. Another thing that kind of tips the Chatter Spike as my favorite is the fact that they came out with this white and chartreuse colored Chatter Spike, which is not in the Razor Shads. So with the Razor Shads, I just stick with pearl. But anyway, so when the fish are focused on shad, that's the bait that I'm throwing. All right, so down here on the TVA especially, and, you know, many lakes across the South, you know, when we're talking about trying to imitate crawfish, most of the time you're talking about, you know, crawfish that have a little bit of red in them. So fire craw is a huge color in recent years. Like, a lot of people have caught a ton of fish off of fire craw because a lot of the crawfish species will turn a bright orange red. However, you know, those I've talked about it before. Crawfish tend to have very contrasting colors. So even if you have a crawfish that has a lot of red on it, it's also going to have some greens, maybe some browns, colors that don't seem to go together. They tend to go together on crawfish for some reason. But crawfish are generally not as like uniformly colored. I'm not saying that any species is uniformly colored, because we all know that everything has counter shading and there's a lot of different colors going on. But a shad, I feel comfortable throwing a color like just straight white or white and chartreuse to imitate shad, or just green pumpkin to imitate bluegill. But when it comes to crawfish, a lot of times I like to do something a little bit different. Because there are a lot of colors going on. Some crawfish are, green with a little bit of brown with little tiny orange tips on them. And there's, to my knowledge, there's hundreds. I think there's hundreds of species of crawfish. Maybe it's dozens. I can't remember which one. But lots of different species of crawfish. So really it depends on where you're fishing, I guess is what I'm going to have to say. But in my neck of the woods, I'm going to show you the colors that I choose. And one of the great things about fishing a chatterbait is that, and I call it the chatterbait system, is because you not only have the chatterbait itself, but you've also got a wide variety of trailers for that chatterbait. Some that were designed for chatterbaits and some that weren't designed for chatterbaits necessarily, but work really well with them, like, the turbo craws. So the first color that I tend to go to is, once I start making that transition into fishing crawfish colors, I will actually start out with the most bright and vibrant of the crawfish, the red fire craw style crawfish imitations. And I will start out with a fire craw trailer or a fire craw chatterbait. So this right here is the fire craw jackhammer. Really solid color this time of year. It's hard to find this chatterbait, this color, because so many people really just go after this color this time of year. As you can see here, what I've done here is I've got the fire craw colored jackhammer, but I've got a green pumpkin chatterspike on the back. That is one combination that I use a lot. But a lot of times this time of year, when I first start fishing the chatterbait or start fishing crawfish imitations, I'll actually go pretty bold, because at that point, they have not seen a ton of these yet this year. And so I'll go like fire craw on fire craw sometimes, okay, and give that a shot, because sometimes being, one of the first fire craw colored baits that the fish see, it can be a benefit. But as the season goes on, I'll then start doing something that's a little bit different. I'll do the fire craw with green pumpkin, okay? And that tends to do really, really well. And then once I start getting the feeling like, man, these fish are starting to get away from that fire craw, that's when I start to go to something like this. This is the new lava craw. And as you can see here, quite a bit different. It's got a similar, fire craw colored blade. However, the fire craw, or the brighter colors, are a little bit duller than the fire craw. You can see here, pretty bright. You got lots of reds, lots of oranges, but here you've only got the belly in orange, and then you've got some green pumpkin strands on the top. And then what I like to do is pair a fire craw or green pumpkin trailer with that, depending on how subdued or bright I want it to be overall. But this seems to be a really good one, kind of that intermediate time period where the fish are starting to see quite a bit of fire craw, and so you want to do something a little bit different. This is a really good color for that. And then as we get further into the season, into the wintertime, and the fish have seen a ton of different fire craw presentations, that's when I like to throw this one right here. This is one that a lot of people don't even think about. It's not on the radar. This is the Heights Hot Craw. This is an awesome, awesome color. It's got the red on the belly. You've got the green pumpkin on the top. And let me tell you, when paired with a fire craw trailer, either, I'm going to be using the razor shads, the chatterspike, or, you know, if I'm really trying to make sure that it looks like crawfish, I'll use these, you know, these turbo craws. But this combination, man, when you throw this in the water, it looks outstanding. The color combination here, it really does bring, you know, a little bit of that fire craw, but it looks way more realistic than any of these other color combinations. And if you think like the fire craw color at all is turning off the bite, you can swap out to a green pumpkin and you still have a lot of really good red in there that imitates a lot of the crawfish species in our area. So those are color combinations I like to use. Now, again, I've kind of broke them down into like beginning, middle, and end of the crawfish focused, you know, time period. But, you know, it really just depends on what you're seeing. Like if I'm on a lake that hardly anybody fishes, I'm not going to even worry about it. I'm probably going to be throwing just you know, trying the fire craw first, regardless of the time period, as long as they're still eating like red or fire craw colored baits, I'm going to be throwing this. But if you go to Guntersville, where there's hundreds of people on the water at any one time, pretty much, I'm probably going to try to do something a little bit different that they probably don't see. So that's when I go to something like this. And in fact, last year at the Toyota Series tournament, I think there was like 315 boats. I ended up getting a top 10 in that one using this principle right here, where, you know, this was one of the baits that I threw, and it just looked way different than, or I shouldn't say way different. It looks just different enough from the just fire craw on fire craw color combination that everybody was throwing to trigger more strikes. And I mean, I would catch them on a fire craw combination, but they would be hooked outside the mouth and they generally be smaller. As soon as I switched to this, they started choking it. It was insane, the difference in the mood of the fish when it came to that color. So anyways, guys, those are the baits or the chatterbaits that I like to throw this time of year, including color combinations, including the trailers and all that. To me, a chatterbait is really well suited for wintertime fishing, especially if you have any type of hydrilla or milfoil around. It's still one of the best baits to throw. And with, you know, incoming dirtier water situations after a rain or something like that, chatterbait definitely is a big player. So anyways, guys, hopefully this helps you. If you're down in this region of the country, definitely give these different combinations a try. I think it's going to help you catch more fish. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, drop a comment below, and I'm going to see you out on the water. Trust the process.